They left no traces, only the silence of the night broken by muffled screams and the muted sound of claws against the earth. In 1898, in colonial Kenya, two lions, maneless, stealthy, and terrifyingly bold, brought the mighty construction of the Uganda-Mombasa Railway to its knees. The workers, mostly Indian laborers, fled in desperation after each night attack. It wasn't just fear, it was panic in the face of the unexplainable, in the face of predators that seemed to act with dark intelligence. Known as Shadow and Darkness, the TSAVO lions killed dozens of people in just a few months. According to Colonel John Henry Patterson, who documented the entire tragedy, there were about 135 deaths. And even though more recent studies indicate a lower number, 34 confirmed victims according to modern scientific analysis, the psychological impact was devastating. By the end of this story, you'll understand why these two lions are now on display at the Field Museum of Natural History, and why their names still send chills down the spines of researchers and locals alike. In this video, we'll dive deep into the real facts behind the terror in TSAVO. You'll learn the story behind the ambushes, the human failures, Colonel Patterson's struggle, and even the secrets only science was able to uncover, over 100 years later. We'll see how a dental infection can turn a king of the jungle into a manhunter, and why the lion's cave became a true altar of fear. Get ready. This is not just a story of survival, it's a portrait of nature when it crosses the line of instinct and enters the realm of human predation, pain, and unpredictability. And the most shocking part, all of it is true. Now, there's only one question left. Are you ready to face Shadow and Darkness? In the year 1898, during the construction of the British railway connecting Uganda to the port of Mombasa, a pair of lions began to terrorize eastern Kenya. Manless, as is common in males of the Panthera leonubica subspecies from the TSAVO region, these felines attacked human camps with, well, precision and brutality. They were quickly named Shadow and Darkness, titles that reflected the fear they spread during their nighttime raids. These weren't just occasional encounters with wildlife, it was, in fact, a pattern of hunting human beings. These predators showed no fear of campfires or fences and honestly seemed immune to traditional defense tactics. According to reports from the engineer in charge of the project, Colonel John Henry Patterson, the lions brazenly entered tents, dragging workers into the darkness of the savannah. As described in his book, The Man-Eaters of TSAVO, published in 1907, the felines killed dozens of laborers, a number Patterson estimated at 135 victims. The first victims were mostly Indian workers hired by the British to speed up the railway's construction. The feeling of terror spread quickly among the workers, many of whom refused to continue. The railway, one of Britain's most ambitious colonial projects in Africa, was now threatened not by technical difficulties, but by two lions. The term man-eaters, once reserved for myth, now had a face, or two. Strikingly, the attacks did not seem random. Many current researchers, like those from the Field Museum of Natural History, suggest that the lions used cooperative strategies to hunt humans, increasing their lethality. The savagery of the attacks, combined with their frequency, made it clear that something unusual was happening. And the impact of these events would echo beyond the African savanna, even leading to the complete suspension of one of the British Empire's largest railway projects. The Uganda-Mombasa Railway Project, known as the Lunatic Express by the British, aimed to connect the interior of East Africa to the Indian Ocean. But in 1898, the progress of the tracks was halted by an unexpected enemy, two lions that had specialized in hunting human beings. The worksite, set along the banks of the TSAVO River, became the stage for a true terror in TSAVO, with daily reports of deaths and disappearances. The threat wasn't just physical, it was also psychological. Tension gripped the camp. Many of the Indian workers key to the labor force brought by the British began abandoning their posts. The camps emptied at night and, well, few dared to sleep deeply. The roars of the TSAVO lions echoed as harbingers of death, shaking the morale of everyone involved in the project. The railway, once a symbol of imperial progress, was now at the mercy of African wilderness. Reports from the time, including those recorded by Colonel John Henry Patterson himself, indicate that the attacks halted construction for weeks. Warehouses were abandoned, tracks left incomplete, and honestly, the Imperial mission suffered its first major setback. What was supposed to be a simple crossing through hostile territory became a battlefield between man and beast. Construction literally stopped because of two animals. As mentioned in the BBC Earth analysis, The panic grew so intense that British officials began considering the withdrawal of the entire expedition. If neither campfires nor thorn fences could stop the nightly attacks, what could protect the workers? Days passed and bodies accumulated. But the clash between humans and predators was far from over. It was only beginning to evolve with new strategies. Faced with the increasing number of attacks, British engineers and workers turned to the defense tactics available at the time. Campfires were lit around the camps, and fences made of dry thorns, known as bomas, were hastily built. The idea was simple: to create a barrier between men and man-eaters. But the TSAVO lions, nicknamed Shadow and Darkness, showed no fear. They acted with an almost calculated boldness. The accounts documented by John Henry Patterson, especially in his book The Man-Eaters of TSAVO, describe how the lions completely ignored the boundaries imposed by humans. At night, they invaded the camps with speed and precision. They leapt over fences, crossed through fires, and silently dragged their victims away. There were no screams, no struggle, only the sound of footsteps fading into the African darkness. The feeling was one of helplessness in the face of predatory intelligence. Even with traps set and guards positioned, the attacks continued. It was as if the lions had learned how to bypass every new obstacle. Patterson even built elevated platforms to spend entire nights trying to ambush the animals, but without success. Fear grew as the efficiency of the TSAVO predators defied logic. How were natural predators outsmarting human cunning with such ease? According to a study published by the Field Museum of Natural History, the lions not only ignored defenses, but seemed to anticipate human behavior. The situation was becoming unsustainable. Conventional tactics had failed, and tension among the workers was palpable. But the fight was far from over, and human strategies would soon evolve into something even more direct and dangerous. Faced with the escalating terror, military engineer John Henry Patterson personally took on the mission of eliminating the TSAVO lions. As head of the Uganda-Mombasa railway construction, he knew that resuming the project depended directly on neutralizing the animals. Armed with a Lee Enfield rifle, he began setting up nightly ambushes, often on makeshift platforms in trees or train cars. For weeks his efforts were frustrated, but his determination was fueled by the growing panic among Indian and African workers. The first victory came on the night of December 9, 1898, when Patterson finally managed to shoot one of the lions. The animal, later known as Darkness, was hit several times before going down. Even wounded, it resisted for hours, showing the impressive strength of these big cats. Nearly 3 weeks later, the second lion, nicknamed Shadow, was killed in a new ambush after a tense chase. As described by Patterson in his journal, this second creature also seemed to defy death with unusual resilience. Upon examining the bodies, I noted some striking features. Both lions were male, but, interestingly, they had no manes, which is actually typical of the TSAVO subspecies. Their skins were carefully preserved and, decades later, sold to the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. As stated by the institution itself, the price paid was $5,000 in 1924, and to this day the stuffed skins remain on public display. They have really become a symbol of the terror in TSAVO. The hunt not only restored some sense of security to the worksite but also marked the region's history with a singular episode of man versus nature conflict. Still, the real scale of the devastation would only begin to emerge after the discovery of a strange find near the railway camp. The trail left by the predators would reveal even more disturbing secrets. After the killing of the two man-eaters, a new revelation would shock those involved in the construction of the Uganda-Mombasa railway even further. Near the TSAVO River, where the nighttime attacks were most frequent, workers found a hidden cave, partially covered by dense vegetation. Inside were scattered human remains, bones and fragments of clothing deteriorated by time. As cited by John Henry Patterson in his book The Man-Eaters of TSAVO, that hideout seemed to be an old den used by the lions. The cave, which later became informally known as the Lion's Cave, was studied by archaeologists and zoologists throughout the 20th century. According to researchers from the Field Museum of Natural History, it's possible that the lions dragged their victims to the site out of sight of the workers to consume the bodies more safely. The fact that the bones bore marks typical of large feline bites supports this hypothesis. The discovery was essential for understanding the predator's modus operandi. For local residents and the few survivors of the attacks, the cave was more than just a hideout. It was a sanctuary of fear. Local reports speak of screams heard in the early morning hours and the feeling that something was watching the workers even in silence. For a long time, no one dared approach that specific point in the territory. The site eventually became a kind of unofficial memorial to the victims of the terror in TSAVO, an open wound in the middle of the savannah. The mystery surrounding the cave only increased the scientific fascination with the case, and it was exactly that fascination that, years later, led to even more detailed analyses of the feeding behavior of the two lions. Modern studies would use cutting-edge technology to uncover, at almost microscopic levels, the true diet of these animals, and what was discovered opened new debates about feline predatory behavior. More than a century after the TSAVO lion attacks, modern science found new ways to examine the events that marked 1898. Using isotopic studies, researchers at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago analyzed the collagen present in the bones of the taxidermied lions. This technique allowed them to determine the proportion of human flesh in the lion's diet. The results indicated that one of the animals consumed the equivalent of 10 people and the other about 24. These numbers are very different from the 135 victims cited by John Henry Patterson in his original accounts. According to the study published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, in 2009, the discrepancies in the numbers are due to factors such as exaggerated reports, duplication of victims, and the collective panic of the time. Even so, the discovery confirmed that the man-eaters did indeed have human beings as a significant part of their diet. This reinforces the brutality of the attacks and the fear that spread among Indian and African workers. Modern technology, therefore, not only brought precision, but also legitimized part of the historical narrative. Another relevant finding was the health condition of the lions. Detailed examinations revealed that at least one of them suffered from a severe dental infection, which may have made it difficult to hunt wild prey and led to the choice of human targets, slower and more vulnerable. This detail was key to explaining the atypical behavior of the big cats, which are usually averse to direct human contact. As mentioned in the study by Larissa DeSantis from Vanderbilt University, the constant pain caused by the infection may have completely altered the animal's predatory instincts. These discoveries helped to debunk myths, but also raised new questions. After all, to what extent can physiological factors turn big cats into feline cannibals, predators of their own kind or of humans? And what if the behavior of the TSAVO lions wasn't just a biological accident but a sign of forced adaptation? Even today, the terror in TSAVO is used as a case study for situations in which the environment and pain shape unlikely monsters. And perhaps the most disturbing part lies exactly in that. So then, after all this, do you still think lions are just hunters of helpless prey? Or is there an invisible boundary between instinct and terror, as we saw in the attacks of Shadow and Darkness? The case of the TSAVO lions wasn't just an isolated chapter in the history of African colonization. It was a reminder that even with iron rails and modern weapons, humans are still vulnerable in the face of wild nature. But tell me, do you believe these attacks were the result of disease, as suggested by the isotopic studies on dental infection? Or do you think there was something darker behind so many disappearances in the middle of the savannah? Leave your theory in the comments. Do you believe more in the scientific explanation, or do you feel there's something unexplainable behind the terror in TSAVO? I really want to know your view on this story. And if you enjoy real mysteries, legendary predators, and stories that blend science, history, and wild nature, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this was just the beginning. There are many dark and fascinating stories coming your way.